the Inter Show. Anthony, how are you?
Good, Andrew. Thank you for having me again.
No, you're more than welcome. Unfortunately, James isn't with us this week, but myself and Anthony are going to take you through the match against Udinese, have a quick look at the newspapers, answer questions that have come in. We'll look at the next match and we'll do a little bit more as well. Anthony, a great win and we're back in the Champions League. Where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, a really, really good response from the boys, and I think it highlights the importance. I think it was very easy to get emotional last week about Juventus. Everybody thought the hopes and dreams were crashing, but this isn't the way Inter would come back in the past few seasons, in my opinion. Not under Mazzarri, not under Mancini's second stint. The Inter that Spalletti has forged needs to be recognized, and it's highlighted in yet another big win. We mentioned last week about how we've had some results this season that are, anti-Inter of the past seasons, the big wins. And this was another one this week, away from home. So in the past, the Inter I know in the past few seasons really could have rolled over and died, and nobody would have turned a blind eye. We all would have been surprised, but it just shows the fight and the grit that is left in some of these players. I just want to comment quickly on the quality of Rafinha. That was his best performance in an Inter jersey so far since he played for us. He absolutely tore Udinese to shreds. They had no answer to him in midfield, and we need to stress the importance of getting this guy locked down into our team. He likes the team. Nobody grabs the badge of a team that they've only been to for a month or a couple of months after coming from a club like Barcelona, which he's definitely attached to. He still says that it will always be his home, but you can tell he's happy here. He's gone out of his way to learn Italian. I think all signs point to us redeeming Rafinha, and if he's here next season, then that'll be the biggest signing already for me. So that's that on the Udinese game. Forza Atalanta for the first time in a while. They got the job done. Credit to them. They've been quality all season. They deserve to get a point against Lazio. They played a lot better than Lazio did, in my opinion. So a lot of people thought that was our last hope. If Atalanta could get maybe a point or steal something from Lazio, and they're very fortunate that they did. And we should not be looking at Lazio's fixture this week. We should just be knowing that it's in our hands, and 2 victories will see us get into the Champions League, which is the penultimate goal.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we just have to concentrate on ourselves and forget everything else, knowing that if we win the next 2 matches, we're in the Champions League. The only thing that I would say is that Lazio do go away to Crotone, and Crotone are fighting for their lives to stay in Serie A. And of course, they've dyed-in-the-wool Interista as their manager, Zenga. So I'm sure he'd love to pull something off. There's been a lot of talk this week, I suppose in the last couple of weeks, about if we can only keep one player, should we keep Rafinha or should we keep Cancelo? Which would you opt for, Anthony?
It's a tough one because in terms of quality and what they bring to the team, it's no questions asked. Rafinha all around is the more valuable player to have in any starting 11, because what he brings is the dynamic effect to score goals. But Cancelo is a great right back, and we are fiending for a right back more than any other position on our starting 11, I feel. Our fullbacks have needed fixing for a long time, and now we have the option for a very, very good fee, in my opinion. As I touched on last time, it may look like a lot of money to us, 35 million, but this is peanuts in today's market, in my opinion. And if we don't snap him up for 35, another club is going to think this guy's worth a $44 or $45 gamble, whereas we know he's a $35 million assurance. So we have that advantage already. If you're asking me which one I'd take between the two, I'm still going to go with Rafinha, just because I think we're crying out for a player of his quality. Otherwise, we are just so static in midfield. And Brozovic has resurrected himself at this team, and I think him complementing with Rafinha is great. But I just see our spark and everything that has made us look good in the new year failing if Rafinha is taken out of this side. So I would choose the one to be Rafinha, but please, I'm hoping for both. I think that should be our top priority. And if we can seal both of them, I'm fine with the transfer market only having brought in those few names that we are linked to, which we might touch on another time.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Rafinha is a much more difficult player to get hold of. An attacking midfielder, creative midfielder who slots into your team so comfortably. The only thing that I would say is I don't have any faith whatsoever in Auxilio in terms of purchasing fullbacks, and that would probably be why I would lean towards settling with Cancelo. That said, I firmly agree with you that we need to sign both of them, and we're only going to kick ourselves in the future if we don't. Where did you think other than Rafinha, where did you think the game was won?
The game was won purely on our confidence and our will to win, because we are a much better team than Udinese on paper, tactically, mentally. I mean, they have been horrible this season. They just might be one of the poorest sides I've seen play this season, and they're in a horrible run of form at the moment. So anything less than a comprehensive win would have been typical Inter. But we saw what we wanted to see. We saw everybody in that starting 11 play well. I think after his first shaky 10 minutes, I think Dalbert actually held himself very well. I, for one, was very excited to see him. I'm a very logical person. So when you make a purchase of 30 million at the start of the season and you choose not to use that player, I start to ask a lot of questions. And I've been frustrated all season with seeing someone that we have invested in so much sit on the bench and not even get a whisper or a minute, and see Davide Santon played ahead of him time and time again. I think he actually played really, really well and held himself really well on that left-hand side. And I, for one, wouldn't be against him starting every match for the rest of the next 2 matches for the rest of the season at left back, especially if D'Ambrosio isn't feeling 100%. Other than that, to be honest, I think Brozovic really continues to perform at a level where I don't think there's any fans left who would be willing to sell him. We need to remember January, he was linked not only with a loan move, but a permanent move to Sevilla as well. Apparently it was actually seriously going to happen. It's hard to believe now because I can't see our midfield functioning very well without him and Rafinha in it. He did forge a good partnership with Gagliardini, and I think it's great that he familiarized himself with him, because when Gagliardini was injured, Brozovic was able to take over that role and elevate the performance of Borja Valero over the weekend. That's another mention should go out to Borja Valero. He played pretty well. It's still noticeable that he's the slowest man in our midfield, 100%. But against a side like Udinese, he did everything he needed to do. Very comfortable on the ball, took his time with his touches, made some productive passes forward, and he took his goal very well, which should do wonders for his confidence, because he does look like a confidence player, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to actually raise the question of Borja Valero, because I'm quite often very critical of him. Whilst I agree that he still was evidently the slowest player on the pitch, I don't think his energy is never going to be his biggest asset. But his passing during the match, I really thought he was the engine room of Inter going forward, because the passes that he was laying off just left the opportunity for more energetic, faster players to run onto the ball, to move. And really, despite his actual physical slowness, his passing against Udinese really opened the match up, I felt. There's a question coming from Edward about Dalbert. Should we start with him rather than starting with D'Ambrosio? Which I was going to ask later on, but you've sort of answered that from your perspective. I'd be a bit more cautious, just simply because it's the last 2 matches of the season. I think throwing somebody that you haven't really used all season into a situation like that, where every minute of every match counts, is a really big ask. And if D'Ambrosio is fit, I'd probably go with him. Although I was impressed with Dalbert at the weekend. I'm going to have to send a shout out to Handanovic, because I was very critical of him last week, and he made a really good save when the match could have become 1-1, and then we'd have been in a real dogfight. So I never said that he wasn't a great shot stopper. I questioned his all-round goalkeeping ability. But a shout out to him on that. I think looking forward, we're playing Sassuolo at the weekend on Saturday night. Sassuolo are safe. Does that mean it's going to be an easier match, Anthony?
At this stage of the season, you don't want to be playing teams fighting for relegations, fighting for European places, and fighting for a potential title. So you want to be playing teams stuck in that middle ground who have nothing to play for. That being said, Torino have nothing to play for and held Napoli to a 2-2 draw on the weekend and effectively handed the title over to Juve. So I'm not too sure if Spalletti is going to look tactically different from this, because we've got a bit of information here for anyone listening. João Cancelo, Candreva, Eder, Perisic, and Ranocchia, all these players are one yellow card away from suspension. So out of those players, João Cancelo, Candreva, and Perisic are potential starters. Whether or not Spalletti chooses to start some of those players on the bench, I don't know. Since Sassuolo have nothing to play for, I don't assume they'll be playing a very attacking match, which means Candreva literally has no place in this team over Caramo at the moment, in that sense anyway. I think it was a good decision to start Candreva last week. But I think this week, if he's on a yellow card, then he should be left on the bench, because I would be starting Candreva in a big match against Lazio. I think he performed quite well against Juventus. He is more tactically switched on than Caramo, and he just has a higher footballing IQ overall. So we could use him for Lazio. So it makes all sense to leave Antonio Candreva on the bench this weekend. Cancelo, if D'Ambrosio is fit, I have no problem with D'Ambrosio playing right back against Sassuolo and Dalbert playing on the left back. I think he's come under a bit of criticism this season, but many people need to remember left back is not his natural side. Right back is his natural side. And for the first start of the season, he actually played quite well at right back. It was when he's deployed on the left that he's been shaky. But he has returned. He has still played well for me all round all season. So if he was to be slotted into right back and Dalbert play left back, I would not be against Cancelo starting on the bench in this match either. What are your thoughts on that?
In terms of the players that are on a yellow card away from a suspension, I agree with you that it is a risk to throw them in, but I think it's a bigger risk that if you don't play your best side against Sassuolo and you don't get that win, then the following weekend could become irrelevant anyway. I know it's a risk, but I would start with the best team available to Spalletti. It could backfire, but I think it also could backfire looking at it from another point of view. And it's worth remembering that Sassuolo are owned by a major Milanista. He's a guy who doesn't have any time for Inter. He's going to have his manager. He's going to have his players really going into this match as if it's I think he's going to have it as if it's a cup final for them, because he'll just see it as that opportunity to hurt Inter. I know Sassuolo don't technically have anything to play for, but there is that emotional side to it. So I'd be keen to sort of start with the best possible side. Bearing that in mind, now we need a major victory at the weekend for it to happen, and we also need Crotone to at least take a point off Lazio. But it's not impossible that we go into that final match with two results available to us. The likelihood is that we're going to go to Lazio needing to win. If we were to beat Sassuolo by 7 goals or more and Lazio drew, then we go into that match also being able to draw. Now that sounds slightly outlandish to say that we could beat Sassuolo by 7 goals, but I can't see it happening. To be honest, at this stage, I'd be happy with a 1-0 win. But it is worth remembering that we've beaten Sassuolo by that scoreline twice in recent years, twice when Inter weren't playing well. And whilst I would approach the game looking for that 1-goal, 2-goal lead, if what happened against Udinese last weekend happens again, where we go in at half time 3-0 up, instead of taking our foot off the pedal, which I felt was a mistake because there were goals to get in that match, and that could have really evened things up on the goal difference point of view. I think if we do go in with a comfortable margin at halftime, we really have to go at this game in the second half. What would you think on that, Anthony?
Yeah, I was looking at the table today as we speak, and I was noticing the goal difference as well. Look, I've had it in my head that we need to go to Rome to win, to beat Lazio. That's as simple as that. And to be honest, I actually prefer the idea of the Inter I know going somewhere and fighting to win rather than sitting back and being complacent. A nervous Inter is already bad news for me in my books. But I've already got it in my head that we'll be going to Lazio needing 3 points. And if that's the case, then that's the case, so be it. In regards to Sassuolo, 2 very, very good fixtures. I remember them fondly. And as you said, it was a false dawn, those 2 matches, especially the first time we beat them 7-1 away from home. I think it was only the 3rd or 4th fixture of the campaign. And it really, really gave me a false sense of hope for the campaign. Those were very bad Inter sides, as you mentioned before. So going into this match, if we were half time at a comfortable lead, especially in front of 70,000 fans, which has just been confirmed today, has sold out the San Siro. Shout out to our fans. They've been the best in Italy this year, head and shoulders. Noticeably, no other side has come close to our home fans this season. So, yeah, let's hope that they can get the job comprehensively, and I think we will. But other than that, we'll go into Lazio on the final day and we'll beat them.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from in the sense that Inter go to Rome as slight underdogs if they need that win, and probably that kind of suits the mentality of our team. Just looking at the newspapers, Metro Milano led with Udine kaput in the hopes that Nerazzurri win 4-0. Atalanta stops Lazio 1-1. New hope for the Champions League. Il Corriere dello Sport, Champions League, we believe it. Inter's manager is satisfied with the performance of his players. Now he asks for the final push. Borja Valero is happy for the goal, and when celebrating, he pointed to the sky, dedicating it especially to our story. Best player, Rafinha, with a score of 7.5. No worst player, all 6 or above, which means that the Corriere felt that they were all satisfactory. Il Messaggero Veneto, the Udine newspaper, Udinese beaten up, now 4th from bottom. Inter scores 4 and wins away at the Friuli. Serie B is only a point away for Udinese, obviously. Best player Brozovic, 7. Worst player Skriniar and Karamov, 5.5. Tutto Sport, Spalletti relaunches by unbalancing Udine. Best players Brozovic and Rafinha, 7.5. No worst player, all 6 or above again. La Gazzetta dello Sport, Inter, it depends on you. 4 goals against Udinese. Now Lazio are closer. Best player Rafinha, 7.5. Worst player Candreva, 5.5. In other news, you remember a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking about Regina Berese's Inter Femminile. They won away 2-1 to Marcan, but unfortunately, Arabica are still a point ahead of them. Inter Femminile season is finished, and it'll be Arabica going through to the playoffs. In other news, it's been announced that a decision on creating reserve sides, or B sides as they'll be called in Italy, is only a couple of days away, and the plan looks like it's to have them playing in Serie C. Anthony, what's your view on that?
I absolutely love the idea of having, if bigger clubs are able to forge a second side together to play competitively. However, I firmly believe that the financial capacity of the club shouldn't dictate where that club starts. You just mentioned that they're thinking of making them start in Serie C. I think they should actually make them start further down, which isn't a popular opinion. It's just a personal opinion of mine. I, for example, see big clubs starting teams in Serie C and having the financial capacity to maybe push those clubs a little bit, those youth systems a little bit further than other clubs, and therefore see the rise of their club. But to be honest, nothing would make me happier than to see another Inter side play competitively up top in Calcio in Italian football. We've seen it happen in Spain. Barcelona B are in the second division there, but they never look like they're going up top. What's your opinion on it, Andrew?
I would agree with you. It reminds me of the discussion that comes around every so often in this part of the world about Celtic and Rangers, and the argument, I suppose it has a bit more gravity talking about Celtic at the moment, that because of the size of those clubs, they're too big for the Scottish Premier League. And the idea that they should move south. I mean, not in terms of geography, but in terms of the league that they play in. And you often hear I live in Ireland, so it's much more Celtic fans that I would have conversations with, but about them moving into the Premier League, where I simply don't think that they would survive, or even into the Championship. But I think if you do that, which I don't think is ever going to happen, because although Celtic and Rangers need a bigger opportunity, England isn't crying out for big clubs. It has plenty of them, and they're not all playing in the Premier League either. But if you move them down into the Championship, then who do you move out of the Championship to make the structure continue to fit? And are you going to take a place off a team that's already earned their place in that division? I don't think that's fair, and I would agree with you in terms of starting them out. I don't know where I'd start them out, because starting them out in the lowest echelon seems a bit ridiculous. But at the same time, again, you're taking away from another club if you start them any higher up. Where would you start them off, Anthony?
Sorry, Andrew, I just caught the last 5 seconds of that. Do you mind just repeating that? Reception was bad.
Just basically, it reminds me of the idea of Celtic and Rangers going down into England, and the concept that Celtic and Rangers should move, or the argument from Celtic and Rangers fans that they should move into at least the Championship. That would be taking away a place from clubs that have earned that position, and it smacks of that a little bit by moving them immediately into Serie C. But I'm not sure that moving them into the lowest rank is productive either. So I'm not sure where exactly to put them. I mean, what do you think on that?
I think that the Scottish dominance definitely suggests that there is power. There is a couple of powerhouses in that league, but that's not the only league in the world. You can't tell me the French league is more than a one-horse race at the moment. That's an absolute joke of a league, the Ligue 1, to be honest. While the Dutch league has become more competitive in the last three seasons, there has been a series of dominance with Ajax and only one other club. Plenty of other leagues in the world, the Spanish La Liga, our own league, for example, Andrew. It's been Juventus for how many years now? It's been Juve times 7. That is a dominant league. So to suggest that the Scottish league should adapt a transition of their two powerhouses south of England, I think it's just because it's been happening for so long that people are really desperate for change. Once that change would take place, I just don't think it would be practical or productive at all. But I definitely agree with what you said. It definitely wouldn't make sense to move another eligible club out of a competitive league to make way for these teams. They would have to in their place, basically. But you definitely can't start a club like Rangers or Celtic down in a lower division. So if you're asking me, I'm actually fully against the thought of moving Rangers and Celtic down south. I think there's two.
Well, bringing it back to the Italian situation, and sort of relating that to the B-sides, and the B-sides going straight into Serie C. That's where I'm uncomfortable, is that you're taking away a place, or presumably taking away a place from a team that's earned that right.
Yeah,
I mean, where would you start them out in the Italian league system, the new B-sides?
I think I would start them about as low as you can possibly start a competitive side, and I also think there would have to be limitations in terms of how much money can be pumped into those teams financially. I mean, it would not make sense for Inter, Milan, Roma, or Juve to have a junior side, to have a second side, and to be able to fund that side and to buy players for that side. That would be way too competitive for, say, the fifth or the sixth tier Italian football. What do you think about it? I just think that if you give these clubs certain power, more power over already struggling Italian clubs. Clubs in Serie A are struggle enough as it is. When you move down the ranks of the divisions of Italian football, these clubs, some of these clubs barely pay their players on time as it is. So surely there will have to be some sort of restriction on place for these big clubs.
I think I'd probably play it. I think it would be slightly convoluted, but to have maybe for the first few years a separate league system for reserve teams, and then the teams that finish a certain height up the in terms of that reserve league, they then enter the playoff system against the teams that finish lower down in Serie C. If they win those playoffs, they go into Serie C, and the Serie C team that loses drops down to Serie D. It's slightly convoluted, and I'm grateful that I'm not the person placed to try and come up with a system that works for everybody. But I don't think letting them out playing at the very lowest rung would help anybody, because realistically, let's say, for example, the Inter Primavera side is going to be much stronger than a local team that's literally just more or less playing for fun at the weekend. But equally, giving Serie C teams that opportunity to fight to retain their place, something along those lines. But I admit that my thinking is a little bit complicated. Another big news story is that Mancini's going in as the Italy manager. Obviously, we have a great relationship with Mancini. He's also, I've seen he's keen to bring Balotelli back. I mean, Balotelli, since he's moved to France, has really seemed to settle down. He's playing good football. He seems to be a lot more mature. What do you think of the story of Mancini going in to manage Italy?
Well, just going on what you just said about Balotelli, it's true, he has matured a lot, but funny enough, it was only yesterday that he said point blank to a news camera, F French referees, because he was not very happy with the decision. But he has been maturing and he has been in form, and I'm all for bringing Balotelli back to the national team. Being of Italian background myself, a really big part of me died when we weren't able to make this World Cup. I still don't know how I'm going to function in a few weeks' time when it starts. So by all means, bring back Mario Balotelli. He has plenty of talent. Roberto Mancini, well, anything can be better than Ventura, what we were left with before. To be honest, I was really hoping that it would be Antonio Conte again or Carlo Ancelotti. I was leaning towards Ancelotti, but having seen Chelsea struggle toward the back end of the year, I thought Conte might be on his way out, and then he'd look for a nice cozy transition back into the Italian national team going into the Euro 2020 tournament. But I actually think he'll stay at Chelsea, and they would be absolute fools to let him go. I think he's a great manager. But in regards to Mancini, I think he'll do a good job at Italy. His style of football is not the most entertaining, but the Italian way has never been the most entertaining. So in a way, he really is a perfect fit for the national team, and he suits the kind of style that our national team is going to come back to, and that is grinding out results that appear easy to the players and to the manager, but in the eyes of the fans are just grueling and painful. And we've won World Cups like that. And so we'll see how he goes. All the best to Manchio. What do you think?
I mean, it's a cliche, but the Italian style has always been to build from the back, and to be very safe, to be very safe at the back. I mean, I'm not sure that I agree that the Italian style is not entertaining. I love the sort of rapid counter-attacking, which is typical to Italian football. The only thing with Mancini is he's never done very well on a continental scale. He's had big opportunities. He's been at Inter. He's when Inter had a very good team. The second time around, not so good. He's also been with Manchester City when they had a very strong team. They still have a very strong team. And he's never really achieved very much in Europe. That said, Conte has never been the best of managers on a continental scale, but he did a very good job with Italy. So, and I also think when you're going into a dressing room where you've got multi-million-pound players sitting and waiting for you to talk to them, I don't like to criticize Ventura, although his Italy stint was a disaster, because he's been a very good sort of journeyman manager. But you need somebody with more charisma. You need somebody that can walk into that dressing room and say, "Look, you're going to listen to me. I'm Antonio Conte. I did X, Y, Z during my playing career," or "I'm Roberto Mancini. And until you've achieved what I achieved, then you're going to listen to me." When you're Ventura, you don't have that strength. You don't have that strength of character, also that strength of sort of reputation. And I think it can only be a good thing for Italy. Just very quickly in the history section of the show. Just looking back, the 6th of May was a couple of days ago. The 6th of May, 1998, Inter beat Lazio 3-0 to win the UEFA Cup for the third time. And the most significant part of it, I suppose, was it was the first trophy that Javier Zanetti ever won in blue and black. Do you have any memories of that game, Anthony?
At the time, I was only 5 years of age, but I do remember my father coming home in quite a good mood. And this was in my early stages of coming to terms with knowing Serie A and Inter and who they were. And I told my story last week about how my father grew up with Christian Vieri. So it was around about that exact chunk of time that I started to really look at Inter and Vieri and Ronaldo and anything to do with Inter. But no, looking back on that final, no, I didn't actually watch it live, but I do have many memories of that team and that era being the first year that I came to terms with Inter and knowing that this was going to be the club for the rest of my life. What about yourself? What memories do you have of that great night?
Zanetti obviously sticks in my memory, and I think that's a bit looking at it with hindsight. It's because obviously he wasn't the player or figure for the Inter that he did become. He was obviously a very good player at the time, but he, I think I'm kind of romancing a little bit when I look back on it, and Zanetti is my biggest memory of it. It was also the night that really cemented the twinning between the Inter support and the Lazio support. So, I mean, that was a significant event, but again, that's a high insight. I think when you're looking at something 20 years ago, it's very difficult to look back on it in a way where you don't reflect on what you know now, rather than what you knew then. But obviously a great night, and a 3-0 win against Lazio, obviously after having beaten Sassuolo this weekend, wouldn't go amiss. So hopefully looking forward to 3 points at the weekend, and thanks very much to Anthony again for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Till next time.
Till next time, Forza Inter.
Forza Inter.
This is the bit after the show is finished, as requested by some listeners, where we look at a chant sung by our supporters at matches. It's added on after the show and is a standalone piece for those who want to listen to it. The chant this week is "Non ti lasceremo mai," "We will never leave you." And as requested, the translation is Ovunque noi saremo, we will be everywhere. Sempre ti sosterremo, we will always support you. Non ti lasceremo mai, we will never leave you. Forza Inter dai, come on Inter, come on. And until next week, Forza Inter dai.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.